The clinking of fine china and soft murmur of conversations filled the elegant restaurant as Rachel adjusted the collar of her modest blouse, smoothing down the edges with nervous fingers. She glanced at her reflection in the window, her brown curls framing a face that tried hard not to look too eager, too hopeful. It wasn't every day she agreed to a blind date, especially not after the last one, awkward, brief, and painfully superficial. But something about this one felt different. Her friend Ava had insisted, swearing that this man was kind, intelligent, and unlike the others. "He's been through a lot," Ava had said cryptically, "but he's genuine. Give it a chance." So here she was, waiting. The door opened, and a hush seemed to fall over the room as a tall man in a wheelchair entered, pushing himself with practiced ease. Rachel's breath caught when their eyes met. Deep, thoughtful eyes with a strange intensity behind them. He offered a polite smile and rolled forward, stopping just beside her table. "You must be Rachel," he said, his voice warm and steady. "I'm Michael." Rachel stood to greet him, then hesitated. Should she reach for a handshake, a gentle touch on the shoulder? The wheelchair seemed to mark a boundary she wasn't sure how to cross. Michael noticed, smiled slightly, and extended his hand. She shook it, grateful for the simplicity of the gesture. The conversation began over sparkling water and breadsticks. Michael was articulate, thoughtful, and unexpectedly funny. He talked about his love for books, his interest in architecture, and how he appreciated the small details most people overlooked. Rachel found herself leaning in, fascinated by his perspective. There was no pity, no awkwardness. Just two people talking, laughing, connecting. He asked about her work, an elementary school teacher passionate about underprivileged kids. She lit up when she spoke of her students, the way their eyes sparkled when they finally grasped a concept, the heartbreaking stories they brought into the classroom, the dreams they dared to whisper during recess. Michael listened, not just with ears, but with intent. Like every word mattered. "You must be proud of what you do," he said sincerely. Rachel shrugged, but her eyes betrayed her pride. "Sometimes I wonder if it's enough, but I try to show them that someone cares, that they matter." Michael paused, looking down for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. That's more than most people ever do. By the end of dinner, the air between them felt different. There was no mention of the wheelchair, no discussion of limitations or labels. Just stories, glances, and something unspoken taking root. As they stepped outside, he rolling beside her, she walking. Slowly, Rachel couldn't help but feel the stirrings of something rare. It wasn't just attraction. It was the feeling that this man, this stranger, somehow saw her fully. They stood under the amber glow of a street lamp, both unsure whether to speak or let silence hold the moment. Finally, Michael broke it. "Thank you, Rachel, for treating me like just me." She smiled, soft and sincere. "There's no other way I'd want to." He gave a short nod, but behind his eyes, something flickered, something almost conflicted. As she watched him roll away into the night, Rachel didn't see a man in a wheelchair. She saw someone strong, someone hiding pain. And maybe, just maybe, someone worth knowing more deeply. What she didn't know was that behind Michael's charm and kindness lay a secret, one that could change everything, and he wasn't ready to tell her. Not yet. The days that followed their first meeting drifted by slowly for Rachel, though she wouldn't admit how often her thoughts returned to Michael. She found herself replaying their conversations, the way he listened so intently, the humor that sparkled under his calm demeanor. She'd been on dates before, some charming, some decent, but none had left her feeling quite like this. There was something about him that lingered, as if he'd handed her a piece of himself she didn't yet understand but already cherished. Michael, on the other hand, sat in his private penthouse suite 30 stories above the city, staring out at the skyline as dusk fell in streaks of violet and gold. In the silence, the weight of his lie began to press down harder than usual. The chair beside him, untouched, unmoving, stood like a symbol of the choice he had made. Not because he needed it, but because he had chosen it. To protect himself. To see who would see him beyond the mask of wealth and power, Rachel had seen him. And that terrified him more than he could admit. He hadn't meant to like her. Not really. When he started these experiments, as Olivia called them, it had always been a game of observation, a test of integrity. But Rachel, she was different. She wasn't dazzled by appearance, nor fazed by his silence about his condition. She spoke to him like she'd known him for years, not like she was trying to impress him. And now he found himself hesitating, unsure of what would happen if the truth surfaced. His phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "There's a school fundraiser this weekend. It's small, but the kids are excited. If you're free, I'd love for you to come." Michael stared at the screen for a long time. No one had invited him into their world in a long time, at least not without expectations. She didn't ask about his wealth, didn't probe into his past. She simply invited him. He replied, "I'd be honored." Saturday arrived with the scent of popcorn in the air, laughter echoing through the playground and little hands tugging at paintbrushes and sticky candy. Rachel moved through the chaos with practiced grace, gently helping a child tie their shoelace, then directing parents toward the raffle table. She looked up just in time to see Michael navigating the bumpy sidewalk toward the entrance, his wheels jerking slightly on the uneven pavement. Their eyes met, and he smiled, offering a subtle wave. Her heart leapt, not because he came, but because he looked like he belonged. She hurried to greet him. "You made it." "I said I would," he replied, his gaze sweeping over the lively scene. "It's more colorful than I expected," Rachel laughed. "It's chaos, but it's beautiful too." Michael followed her through the schoolyard, meeting curious children and amused parents. Rachel introduced him simply as her friend, and to his surprise, no one treated him like a spectacle. One boy climbed onto his lap without warning, holding up a paper crown he'd made. "Do you want to be king too?" the boy asked. Michael blinked, then chuckled. "Sure. Why not?" The paper crown rested lopsided on his head as laughter erupted around them. Rachel stood nearby, her eyes watching him. Not the man in the wheelchair, but the one beneath the paper crown, the one laughing freely for the first time in years. And in that moment, Michael felt something shift. For the first time since he'd started this lie, he wanted to stop pretending, but the longer he waited, the harder it became to undo. Later, as the sun dipped low and the event wound down, Michael lingered by the school gate. Rachel joined him, arms folded, face lit with the glow of fading sunlight. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Today meant a lot to me, to the kids." "It meant a lot to me too," he replied. Then, almost whispering, "More than you know." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just full. "I'd like to see you again," he added. She smiled. "Then you will." But behind that smile, Rachel felt something else. Curiosity. A flicker of unanswered questions. Because no matter how much Michael tried to hide it, she could feel there was something he wasn't telling her, and she was patient, but not blind. Michael's world felt increasingly complicated as the days turned into weeks. Each meeting with Rachel peeled back layers he'd carefully built around himself, but the truth, the one he feared most, still remained locked away. She had an uncanny way of seeing through pretenses, yet he wondered if even she could ever truly understand why he had chosen this path. One evening, they met at a quiet cafe tucked away from the city's bustle. The soft hum of jazz played in the background as Rachel stirred her tea thoughtfully. Michael watched her, grateful for the normalcy that these moments brought, away from boardrooms and the endless eyes of the public. Here, he wasn't a billionaire or a man in a wheelchair. He was just Michael. Rachel broke the silence. "You don't have to keep carrying this weight alone." He sighed, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "I'm afraid if I let go of the chair, if I show who I really am, I'll lose everything. People's respect, their trust, maybe even you. She looked up, her eyes steady and kind. But you don't have to prove anything to me. I like you for who you are, not what you show. The honesty in her words softened the walls inside him, but doubt lingered. How long could a foundation, built on a secret, hold? One afternoon, as Rachel was walking through the city park, she noticed Michael sitting quietly on a bench, not in his wheelchair, but standing beside it. His posture was strong, confident even, and his face was calm as he watched children playing nearby. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it stirred a new kind of hope inside her. "Michael," she called softly. He turned, surprise flashing across his face before a smile took over. "Rachel, I thought I'd surprise you." She stepped closer, noticing the absence of the chair beneath him. "You're walking," he nodded. "I didn't want to hide anymore. Not from you, not from myself." Rachel's heart swelled with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that once the truth came out, you'd see me differently. That the chair was the only thing that made me acceptable." She took his hand, steady and reassuring. "Michael, you're so much more than that chair or any fear you carry." In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened, built on trust and vulnerability. But as their connection grew stronger, so did the shadows around Michael's secret. Olivia, his sister, remained skeptical and distant, warning him about the dangers of playing with people's emotions. "It's not just a game," Michael told her once, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's about finding someone who loves me for me, not my status or my past." Olivia shook her head. "Just be careful. Lies, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of unraveling." Rachel, unaware of the full extent of Michael's deception, planned a surprise for his birthday. She gathered the few friends he'd confided in and organized a small celebration, hoping to bring light and joy into his carefully guarded world. When Michael arrived at the restaurant, the look on his face was one of pure surprise. The laughter, the warmth. It was a reminder of the life he longed to live without pretense. And in that moment, he realized that to truly be free, he had to face the hardest truth of all, to reveal who he really was, and trust that love could survive even the most beautiful lie. But as the night wore on, a quiet question lingered in Rachel's mind. How much had she really seen? And how much was still waiting to be uncovered? The fragile trust between Rachel and Michael began to ripple under the weight of unspoken truths. Though Michael had taken steps to reveal pieces of himself, the core of his secret remained buried, a secret that, like a dormant storm, threatened to break at any moment. One rainy afternoon, Rachel arrived at Michael's penthouse with a small gift, hoping to brighten his day. The city outside was gray, mist blurring the edges of skyscrapers as water traced quiet rivers down the windows. She found him sitting by the fireplace, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen. He greeted her with a faint smile, but there was a heaviness in his eyes that pulled at her heart. "Michael, you've been distant," she said gently, settling beside him. "You can talk to me, you know." He took a deep breath, fingers tracing the worn leather of his chair. "There's something I haven't told you. Something I thought I could control, but it's getting harder to hide." Rachel reached out, her hand covering his. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." He looked up, a flicker of hope battling with fear. "When I first pretended to be disabled, it wasn't just to test others. It was to protect myself, to keep the world at bay. But I never meant to hurt anyone, least of all you." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, not from anger, but from the depth of his confession. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" Michael's voice trembled. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd feel betrayed. Afraid the man you thought you knew didn't exist." She squeezed his hand. "Michael, I care about the person you are, not the secrets you keep." Yet even as she spoke, doubt lingered in her mind. How much of their time together was real? How many moments had been shadows of a lie? Days passed with a quiet tension between them, Rachel found herself watching Michael more closely, searching for cracks in the carefully constructed facade. She noticed how sometimes his eyes would darken with pain, how he often retreated into silence when questions edged too close. One evening, determined to bridge the growing distance, Rachel invited Michael to a charity event for disabled veterans. The event was a chance for her to share a part of her world with him, and for them to walk together into a space where vulnerability was met with strength. As they entered the hall, Michael's eyes scanned the crowd. He was surrounded by people who faced battles far greater than his own, men and women who wore their scars with pride. For a moment he felt exposed, not by the truth, but by his own pretense. Rachel took his arm. "You don't have to pretend here." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I want to be honest, with you and with myself." Throughout the evening, Michael listened to stories of resilience and courage, each one a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome. Rachel saw a new light in him, a man beginning to embrace his truth. But as they left the event, the silence between them was heavy. Michael finally broke it. "Rachel, I want to tell you everything. No more secrets." She looked at him, heart pounding. "I'm ready." What followed was not just a confession but a revelation that would test the very foundation of their connection. Because sometimes the hardest truths come wrapped in love, and forgiveness is the most courageous act of all. And as the rain fell softly outside, two souls prepared to face a future uncertain, but bound by hope. The night stretched quietly between them as Michael began to unravel the story he'd held inside for so long. Rachel sat close, her eyes never leaving his, ready to catch every word, every tremor of emotion in his voice. The truth was a fragile thing, and Michael knew that once released there was no way to take it back. He told her about the accident that had never happened, the event that had forced him into the wheelchair that, in reality, he did not need. It was a lie born from fear and heartbreak, a desperate shield he used to keep the world at a distance. The truth was darker, more complicated. The billionaire heir who seemed invincible was a man weighed down by past failures, by the crushing expectations of family, and by the loneliness of a life lived behind walls of gold. "I was broken in ways no one could see," he confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "The chair became my armor. It kept people from seeing my scars." Rachel reached out, her hand steadying his. "But you don't have to hide anymore. Not from me." He swallowed hard, relief and anxiety swirling in equal measure. "I'm afraid you'll hate me, that this lie will destroy everything." Her gaze was fierce, filled with a quiet strength. "Michael, love isn't about perfection. It's about accepting someone's truth, the good and the bad." The days that followed were not easy. Rachel grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, confusion, but also compassion. She understood why he had hidden behind the wheelchair, but she couldn't ignore the pain of the deception. Yet despite everything, her heart was pulled toward him, toward the man who had shown her kindness, humor, and a glimpse of a soul searching for redemption. They decided to face the world, together starting with Michael's family. The Carters were influential and proud, unaccustomed to scandal or weakness. Olivia, his sister, watched their growing closeness with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant hope. "Just be sure this isn't another game," she warned Michael. One evening. "Real love doesn't come from secrets." Michael nodded, determined to make amends, not just with Rachel, but with himself. Together, they organized a charity initiative to support those with disabilities and those struggling with invisible pain, turning Michael's past deception into a cause for good. The project became a beacon of hope, a symbol that even the deepest wounds could lead to healing. Rachel stood by Michael's side at the launch event, her heart swelling as she watched him speak openly about his journey, the mistakes, the fear, and the courage it took to embrace truth. The crowd listened, moved by the honesty and vulnerability. In the quiet moments that followed, Michael took Rachel's hand. "You saved me," he said simply. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. No, you saved yourself. I was just lucky enough to be there. Their story, once shrouded in secrets and shadows, had become one of hope, forgiveness, and the power of believing in second chances. And as the city lights flickered beyond the window, two hearts beat in unison, stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever came next. The months that followed the charity event marked a new chapter in Michael and Rachel's lives, a chapter filled with healing, growth, and the quiet strength that comes from facing the truth together. But, even as their bond deepened, life, as it often does, tested their resilience in ways neither had anticipated. Michael's public confession about his deception had sent ripples through the media and social circles. Some condemned him for the lie, while others admired his courage to come clean. For Rachel, the fallout was harder in unexpected ways. Friends questioned her judgment. Whispers followed her down familiar streets. But she stood firm, knowing the heart behind Michael's story was real. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, Michael spoke softly, his hand wrapped around hers. I never imagined honesty could feel this freeing, and this frightening. Rachel smiled, leaning into him. Truth has a way of shaking everything up before it settles. Their project to support those with invisible struggles flourished, drawing attention from communities eager for change. Together, they became advocates not just for physical disabilities, but for emotional and mental healing, champions of stories that often went unheard. Amid the whirlwind of public attention, the couple carved out quiet moments, shared breakfasts, long walks, and evenings filled with laughter and dreams. Rachel saw Michael's true strength in these moments, a man unafraid to be vulnerable, willing to rewrite his story with honesty as his guide. But the road wasn't without bumps. Olivia, who had always been wary, finally reached out to Rachel one afternoon. You've changed him, she admitted, voice softer than Rachel expected. For the better. Rachel smiled, gratitude warming her heart. Sometimes all it takes is someone to believe. The future still held uncertainties, but together, they faced each challenge with open hearts and unwavering support. Their story, once a tangled web of secrets and fear, had blossomed into a testament to the power of truth, love, and forgiveness. As the city lights shimmered below, Rachel and Michael sat side by side, knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories are born not from perfection, but from courage. The courage to be seen, to be known, and to never give up on hope.